In 1666, a 23-year-old man sitting on a farm in rural England was rewriting the laws of the universe. While London burned, while the plague swept entire streets empty, Isaac Newton stayed alone in a small room with a candle and a notebook, and in 18 months produced more than most scientists produce in an entire lifetime. But what formed this man? What city, what era, what world created the mind that explained gravity, light, and motion? That is what we are going to discover today. In this video, I am using modern AI tools to reconstruct the London that Newton knew, the city he watched burn, watched rise from the ashes, and where he chose to live the most powerful years of his career. We are not just looking at an ancient city. We are stepping into the world that shaped the greatest scientist who ever lived. If you enjoy this journey into the past, like the video and subscribe so you don't miss our next reconstructions. To understand Newton, you first need to understand the England he was born into. 1642, a nation in civil war. King Charles I was losing control of the country to Parliament, and violence was spreading across the roads between cities and fields. Newton was born that same year, premature, so small his mother said he could fit inside a coffee mug. Nobody expected him to survive. He survived. And the world was never the same again. When Newton arrived at Cambridge in 1661 at 19 years old, the university he found was medieval in form and in thought. Professors still taught Aristotle as absolute truth, the earth at the center of the universe, the movement of the planets as divine will. Newton sat in class, copied what he was told to copy, and back in his room secretly read Descartes, Galileo, and Kepler, like someone reading forbidden books. He already knew, before anyone else had noticed, that the world worked differently. And then came the plague. In 1665, the Great Plague reached Cambridge and the university closed its doors. Newton was sent back to his family farm in Woolsthorpe in rural Lincolnshire. For most people, it would have been a forced exile. For Newton, it was the greatest gift fate could have given him. No classes, no obligations, no one to interrupt. He stayed alone with his own mind for 18 months. And in those 18 months, he invented differential calculus, discovered that white light is made of all colors, and drafted the first calculations of what would become the law of universal gravitation. All of this before the age of 25. All of this on a farm in the middle of nowhere, while more than 100,000 people were dying in the cities around him. The legend of the apple was born here. Newton himself told the story decades later. Sitting in the garden, he watched an apple fall, looked up at the moon in the sky, and had the thought that would change everything. What if the same force that pulls the apple to the ground also pulls the moon toward the earth? What if gravity does not stop at the surface of the planet? What if it reaches as far as the eye cannot see? When the plague receded, Newton returned to Cambridge. But it was London that would absorb him completely. And the London he found was a city that had just lived through the greatest trauma in its history. In the early hours of September 10, 1666, a baker on Pudding Lane left his oven burning. A single spark. And in 4 days, the Great Fire of London consumed 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and practically the entire medieval city that had stood for centuries. The AI reconstructions show what the engravings of the time tried to capture. The entire Thames reflecting the flames, both banks burning at the same time, creating the illusion that even the water was on fire. 300,000 people lost their homes in 4 days. Before the fire, London was a city built on top of itself. The streets followed the same layout as the Romans, 1,000 years earlier. Timber-framed houses with 3 and 4 floors projected outward at each level, almost touching at the top, blocking the sunlight below. London Bridge, the only crossing over the Thames, had shops and houses built along both its sides. Beneath it, the current was so violent that boatmen charged double to cross under the arches. The fire ended all of that, and King Charles II ordered the city rebuilt on the same crooked streets as before, but this time in stone and brick. The city that rose from the ashes was wider, better lit, with proper pavements. St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Christopher Wren, began rising on the horizon as the symbol of a new London. It was this London, still smelling of smoke and fresh lime, that Newton came to inhabit. In 1696, 30 years after the fire, Newton was appointed director of the Royal Mint, housed inside the Tower of London. His mission was to reform the British monetary system, which was being destroyed by counterfeiters, circulating coins with less silver than they should contain. Newton brought to the work the same obsession he brought to everything in his life. He went to the taverns himself, disguised himself, infiltrated the poor neighborhoods to identify criminals. He was responsible for sending at least 20 people to the gallows. The same man who discovered the laws of motion knew the back alleys of London, as well as he knew the orbits of the planets. The coffee houses had multiplied across the entire city and become the intellectual center of the age. For a penny, any man could walk in, order a cup, and spend hours in debate about philosophy, politics, or science. It was there that Newton's ideas circulated before they were even published. Other scientists discussed his calculations, challenged his conclusions, tried to understand what he was saying. Newton rarely appeared. He was known as a man of few words, many secrets, and zero patience for anyone he considered his inferior. In 1687, when he published the Principia Mathematica, the book that explained universal gravitation in mathematical language, the scientific world fell silent for a moment. Then came the astonishment. In a few pages, Newton had explained why the planets orbit the sun, why the tides rise and fall, why a stone thrown upward returns to the ground, all with the same equation, all with the same invisible force he had intuited in that garden at Woolsthorpe years before, watching an apple fall. When I look at these AI reconstructed images of the Thames at dusk, with St. Paul's Cathedral in the background and boats crossing the river beneath a copper-colored sky, I wonder whether the people who lived there had any sense of what was happening around them. That inside the same city of stone and smoke, of noisy streets and crowded coffee houses, one man had discovered the invisible rules that govern the entire universe. London survived the plague and the fire. Newton survived the solitude, the obsession, and the genius he himself could barely contain. And both of them, the city and the man, came out of the 17th century transformed forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Tell me in the comments which city you want to see reconstructed next.